Hi-de-ho neighbor, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, back again for video number 14 in VueJS authentication with Auth0 using Vuex and Vue Router. So let's figure out where we are. What do we need to do? We just worked on, in the last video, we worked on changing the interface state programmatically. So when the user's logged in, we get a login button over here. But that login functionality doesn't work yet. So if we go back to our template here, the next thing we need to do is start working on some login functionality. And I put a note here, I changed this and put a note here to remind myself to talk about you have to rebuild the program npm run serve. You have to do that, kill that process and start it over anytime you change an environment variable. But we'll get into that in a second. So let's get into code here and let's talk about what we're going to do next. Let's start with the login button. So I probably should have started with the store here. Nope. This here, the front end. So here's the login button on the front end. It does nothing right now except prints a message. We are in Auth0 login. So if we take a look at the actual code, here it is here, the login.vue shown from over here. And this is the console. We are in Auth0 login. So we had created this. I don't know if I had this in the last one, but what we need to do is call our store and dispatch the Auth0 login that we're going to set up in a second here. So let's just get that dispatch started. So this.store.dispatch is how we access an action within the store. So we need to create a function called Auth0 login within the store that it calls. Now, because I'm getting lazy and dying to finish these videos, I'll talk about why towards the end. There is a new version out that's a little prettier than what I'm actually doing, so I want to finish this and help you learn it, but then we'll talk about a different way of doing things, believe it or not. So here is the Auth0 login function, and what we're going to do is receive a context from the call. So let's step back here to login.vue. The user clicks, here's the login button. The user clicks it and we call locally Auth0 login. That's going to call this local method to this file. Then we are going to dispatch to the store. It's coincidence that it's the same name. I could have named it something different, probably should have for clarity. But when we dispatch on the store, we're calling the Auth0 login on the store. We're telling Vue to do that for us. And so Vue is going to come to the actions here and look for something named Auth0 and call that function. And when it calls that function, it's going to send a context variable. And that context variable, I believe we talked about the state variable up here. The context is actually a level higher where we can access the state variable from the context variable. So we go context.state, and then we call Auth0, which I'm going to show you is the Auth0 code, and then call authorize on their code. But right now, just for simplicity's sake, let's just comment that out in console.log that we are in a store action named Auth0 login. So the login button is going to call this function. It's going to call the store. It's going to print out the store's message on Auth0 login, and it's going to continue on and print this one. Now dispatches are asynchronous, so it'll be interesting to see which one shows up first. So let's rerun the code here. Let's click login, and we are in login. Did I save the file? I probably didn't save the file, so now let's just make sure we're starting from the beginning here. And when I click login, there we go. Now we get our in a store action named auth login, and then we get the we are in Auth0 login. So we get both of them. So we know that we are leaving this Auth0 and we're going to the dispatch and hitting this console.log here first. So now we got to set up the call to Auth0. So to make that call, we need to install the Auth0 SDK. We need to install their code so that they can help us out and we don't have to write all the code to do stuff. So we're going to do an npm install --save auth0.js. So we're just going to copy that code. I'm here on the Auth0 website, their SDK, how to install. They've actually changed their install since I've started. Their install code since I started this long ago, and theirs has gotten much better. And we'll talk about that towards the end. But for now, let's just go to the code here. Let's open up a new terminal here. And let's paste that code, npm install --save auth0-js. That's going to install. If we take a look at our package.json file, we don't have an auth0 dependency yet, but after we do this and install it, now I may get a message that it's already installed because I've actually installed it and rolled things back. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to pause and we'll come back when this is completed. All right, so that finished up, and you should see that the auth0 just popped into play up here. So now it's listed as a dependency. That's why we did the --save. This --save here listed as a dependency. You'll see it's been a while since I've updated this package. I've got a lot of vulnerabilities I need to fix. We're not going to worry about that right now. But I've got auth0 installed now, which means I can now call auth0 from my application. Or at least I can call their code to help myself out in the application. So that's where this comes into play. So I need to create an auth0 variable that I'm going to access in the store, and we are in the store here. So now I just need to put it in the state up here. So I'm going to copy and paste in, and we'll talk about the code in a second here. So here is my auth0 variable that I am creating, and notice I am calling new web auth0. So, well, I guess I need to also import we'll call it AU auth0 from auth0-js. So now that's going to import that code that we just brought in, that we just installed. It's going to import it into this auth0 variable, which is going to be this auth0 variable here. This auth0 is on the state. This is the one that's referenced by this import up here. So we're calling a new object on it. So we're creating a new auth0 object, and then we are going to instantiate their code with this web auth thing here. So if we go and take a look at their code, if I go to the API reference here, that's the installation. Here is where they talk about installing it, and all I did to do was to get here was I typed in Auth0 Javascript API. That gets me their API code. And so here is the initialization, where they talk about creating a new object on it and then sending in your parameters to configure it. So what I'm doing here is I am configuring the code so it knows which of our tenants to access. And when I talk about tenant, again, we are talking about the auth0 tenant here. So this is, I'm in auth0, the dashboard. I logged in. I paused for a second there and logged in. And so here is, you can switch tenants to get to whichever application you're in. This is my auth0 VueJS auth0 tenant for this project. And you can see in the applications, this is where we talked about previously, I think. It's been a while. But this is where we talk about getting the parameters that we need to get everything to work. So let's see, where's our code? Let me get back to the code. So now recall in these videos way back here, where is it? Using the CLI, Vue CLI 3 environment variables. So we talked about environment variables back here in the 9th installment. So that's what I'm doing here is these are the parameters that we can look up in Auth0 and on that web page I just showed you. And then we're going to put those variables in a environment file. So we talked about those environment files previously. And so here is where we put the main stuff in the last one. And now we just have to add a few more parameters. So I'm going to add these parameters here, and then we'll talk about them. It's a lot to look at right there. But just basically, the auth config domain, that's our Auth0 domain that we pulled from from here. That's this stuff, that's this here. And then we'll get client ID. So here's the client ID. I just copied that and put it in here. And remember, this is in an environment file, and we could take this stuff out that has to do with our development stuff and move it to a environment.development file, and I can show that in a little bit. Also, this is what I was talking about in my note. Here, remember to rebuild npm run dev when changing those files. So back here, this new stuff that I just put in won't come into play unless I kill this and start it again. So I'll show that in a second. Let me save this file. We'll show how it magically goes from not working to working. If I remember to debug that when that happens. So basically, the domain, the client ID, the redirect URI, that's where we want to redirect to when we're done. So that's under Vue app domain URL. That's this right here. We want to redirect back to localhost, and that's why you'd want to put this thing in the development file, because you're not going to use localhost on your production. Your production will be your actual web domain, and you're pulling the the information that changes out of your code and putting it in a single place, and that's what this stuff does for you. I talked about that previously in that video number 9. And you'll see that I screwed up here. I have the config domain, and the config domain is twice. It's here twice, so I can delete one of those. And let's see, the client ID is also here twice. So let's get rid of one of those. And then I need to put in some other stuff, the response type and the scope. And again, you can read about all that stuff. I don't want to get too deep into it, but get back to the reference stuff here and look for the available parameters when you, wow, that jumped around. When you instantiate it, what stuff do you need to instantiate it? The redirect URI is where it brings it back to after you've logged in or logged out. The scope is what type of information do you want from the user. It's like when you log into Twitter from another application. If you use Twitter to log into another application, it says what credentials do you want to allow them to, or actually it says this application wants certain credentials from your your profile. What do you want to allow it? So this is the scope. Do you want the email address? There's different things you can ask for from the person's profile within Auth0. So again, I don't want to get too deep into that stuff right now. Just this is what I'm using. The response type, I'm asking for a token and an ID token, and the scope, I'm asking for email, profile, and this is an OpenID. And this is going to affect your backend guy. If you don't ask for the email address and your backend guy tries to retrieve the email address, he's going to get some weird errors. So you got to get permission for the email to access the email address in the initialization of the account. So just know that if your services layer person who's verifying the tokens and stuff can't get the email address, it's going to be probably this problem right here. So let's go back to the store and let's look at the information here. So the domain we set up, the client ID, redirect URI, response, scope. I talked about most of that stuff. So we've instantiated this web Auth0. So now we've got this Auth0 variable on the store in the state that we can access that is set up to talk to Auth0 through Auth0's code. So that's what we're doing down here in this action. Is we are calling the state Auth0. So this is connecting back to here. to give us access back to this, and then we're just calling an authorize function, which is their function to go out and get the person authorized. So let's do a save all and see where we're at in the code here. So it hot reloaded, but let's just hit refresh to make sure. So now our login button should actually do something. We click login and we head over to Auth0. Now that actually did work. I thought it wasn't going to work because I did actually have this environment variables before. So let's just to hammer the point home here. In fact, that should have been an error because that wasn't fully loaded there. So I'm going to take these out. I'm going to hit save. And then I'm going to kill the process and run it again. While that builds, I'm going to pause. All right, so that built. And now I'm going to go back to the front end. And we'll go back to our app here. It's going to reload. And we got an error. Domain option is required. So this is domain option is required. This is coming from the instantiation of this right here on Auth0. It's saying the domain is required. It's not finding that. Auth0 config domain. That's not here in this file. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those variables back, and I'm going to save the file. Now, you would think that if I just saved it, I went File, Save, right? I hit Control S. You would think if I go back here and I reload, that it would now work. And it doesn't. And it's because environment variable files don't get reread on hot reloads. So you have to go back here. You have to kill the process, terminate the job, and then run it again. And I'll pause and come back when that is completed. All right, that finished up. So let's take a look at the front end. Now remember, I did nothing but change that, just hot reloaded. Now it works again. So now it's reading those config files, and it's actually loading that that view state object, that Auth0 object is now fully loaded, and this is their code running here, and it's all set up to talk to their servers to handle the things we need to handle to log in. So now we should be able to click members. We're on the login page because we're not logged in. We click login, and we are taken to the Auth0 page. Notice we're taken off-site to this address that we put in the configuration, and it's throwing in all those variables and stuff that we needed. It creates its own thing, hash or whatever it needs to do, and sets it up. And so you can see I've logged in before. Otherwise, the person can sign up. So I'll log in and click login. And now it's going to come back. But notice I'm not logged in. And that's because if I hit members, I'm not logged in here. And that's because we haven't added the code to actually handle the callback and tell our application that the user is now logged in. So we've got things somewhat working. We're at least getting to the point where we can click login and get to the view. I guess I am kind of logged in that Vue thinks I'm logged in and I haven't logged out. The only way to get back right now, because I don't have a logout button that kills my my state, is I'm not even saving any variables here yet, like I thought I was. Sorry. As far as VueJS or Vue Auth0 is concerned, when I click login, I'm going to that to Auth0's server, and they're sending me back to the localhost callback because they think I'm logged in. I've got the cookies from them to think I'm logged in, but I don't have any cookies locally on here to know I'm logged in. So again, that's the next video. We're 20 minutes in. We're going to end here with the fact that we have completed this part, the login, but we still need to handle the callback. All right, so this is Terry Caliendo. This has been another Dedicated Managers Technology Consulting production. Hopefully you understood today's what I went through today. It was pretty long-winded and pretty all over the place. Unfortunately, that's the way things are with the time I've got. I can't really hone these tutorials down at this time. But hopefully it was understandable, and you understand where we're at and where we need to get to. Again, make sure to subscribe to the Dedicated Managers channel so that as new videos come out, you'll get notified on them. And I guess that's it for this video. I'll stop talking. Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, signing out. Have a great day. Happy programming.